So in this one, we're going to take a look at the first FRQ Prep question from Unit 4, and this is a monopoly question. So we're given a natural monopoly where the ATC actually equals the MC. So it's a little bit unusual in some respect here, but generally they've kind of simplified the problem down for us. And this is a little hard to see, but that's Q3, and that's Q2, and that's Q1. So, and then this is P3, P2, P1, P4, all the way up there. And the others are just letters. So then it says, assume the profit maximizing monopolist is unregulated. Using the labeling on the graph, identify each of the following: quantity, price, profit, deadweight loss. So we're going to kind of observe that at MR equals MC is where they're going to profit maximize. So we find that that equals each other at point C, and that quantity is Q1. And then we look up to find the price. We go all the way up to the demand curve. That appears at A, and the price there is P3. P3. Profit in this one, there's kind of two ways we could describe it. It is from the price here down to the ATC, from the price at A down to the C, or from P3 to P1, all the way over to Q1. So I'm not going to shade that in because otherwise things will get a little messy here. But that box, now there are two ways you could write out that box. You could write P3 minus P1 times Q1, or you can use the letters themselves. A, C, P1, P3. So either one of those would be fine. Now, deadweight loss. We know that deadweight loss will happen if we're not producing at the quantity where supply equals demand or marginal cost equals the price. And we know that that's the price, and we know that this is the supply curve. So that would occur at point F here. That's socially optimal, but they're not there. They're at Q1. They're not at Q3. So the deadweight loss is going to be a triangle A, C, F. So it's down and then over, and that amount is our deadweight loss. Now assume the monopolist can perfectly price discriminate. Using the labeling, identify each of the following. Now if they price discriminate, if they can do it perfectly, this marginal revenue curve will just become the demand curve. So this demand curve would now equal, right, for part B anyways, the marginal revenue curve. So the new MR equals MC is MR equals MC now at point F. So they're going to produce Q3, because that's the quantity at point F. Total revenue is a little bit harder to understand, but understanding is something part of this class. So we're going to see that the total revenue is not going to be just price times quantity, because we're not charging P1. We're charging all the prices between P4 and P1 all along the demand curve down to quantity 3. Now every single quantity on here, every single quantity gets a different price. And so it would be like if quantity 1, well, they get that price. Quantity 2 gets this price. So they get a bunch of different prices. And then one way to think about this, if we kind of sketch this out over here, if that's point F, and that's Q3, that's P4, is to say, for this first person, well, they get charged up here. And so how much total revenue do we get? Well, we get a whole big bunch. We get a big bunch of total revenue from the first one. From the second one, right, because the second one's paying a slightly lower price, we get a little bit less. And the third one, and the fourth one, and we keep going until we find that, in fact, the total revenue is that trapezoid. It's the whole box, defined by P4 all the way down to F to Q3 over to 0. So that trapezoid is the amount of total revenue. Now, if we were asked what's the profit, right, and we aren't, but if we were, it's the total cost has to be subtracted. Well, the total cost is just this lower box. that lower box. So the profit is the triangle P1, P4, F. So the firm would be making lots and lots of profit if they were able to perfectly price discriminate. Now, instead, it's going to tell us, assume the monopolist charges a single price and is regulated to produce the socially efficient quantity. Using the labeling, identify each of the following. So if they're regulated to produce the socially efficient quantity, what that means is they're going to have to produce here at point F. Well, to get them to produce Q3, that quantity, right, they're going to have to charge P1 to get them to do that. So that's partially because if this is the marginal cost curve, right, this is the marginal cost curve, then the marginal revenue would have to be equal to that point. So P1 is going to be their regulated price. They're going to set the marginal revenue curve to basically become this curve as well. So if that's true, right, when we know the quantity is Q3, we'll label that. Which, by the way, some students have observed today. They go, oh, geez, quantity produced here at Q3, this one's Q3 too. Does this mean that the perfect price discriminators are always socially efficient? And I would say, yeah, it does. But what we'll find is something a little different here, that if they produce at P1, right, that's the price that everybody pays is P1. So now everything above the price up to the demand curve, all the way up to P4 and all the way down to F, all of that triangle that we just a moment ago said would have been profit becomes consumer surplus. The area from the price to the demand curve. So P4, P1, F. So we can see that this part C would be really good for consumers. Part B would be really good for the firm. Now it says part D. Is the monopolist in part C earning a positive economic profit, normal profit, or incurring a loss, and explain? So if they're regulated to P1, where is the ATC at Q3? Well, it's equal to P1. So ATC and P1 are equal to each other at this quantity that we're producing at. So we would say P1 equals ATC at Q3, so normal profit. Normal, because they're breaking even, right? If the price equals the ATC, the quantity they're producing, then they're breaking even or getting a normal profit. The last part, point F, is the elastic, inelastic, or unilastic portion. Explain. So this is a pretty simple one, actually, if you know what you're being asked here. From a while back, we had, I'm going to draw this off to the side here, quantity, price, we had a demand curve, we had a marginal revenue curve. And I pointed out that this value, where MR is 0, if we go up to the demand curve, that's the unit elastic point. And any of the range where MR is less than 0, right, any of those where it's negative are the inelastic range. And in this range, here to here, MR is greater than 0. So this is the elastic. Now we already learned this a while back, but now we could just cross-apply it to this understanding. And it says, is point F in the elastic, inelastic, or unilastic, and why? Well, point F on the demand curve, Q3, MR is negative. So that means it's in the inelastic range. Inelastic. And we need an explanation. It's because MR is less than 0. Now, if you're struggling for what all of that makes sense of, there's a different video about that. Remember, this is just for your response question prep, so this is just a review. But hopefully this helps you with FRQ Prep number 1. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.